So what we're gonna do today is we're gonna talk about the Korean entertainment industry and K-pop in general and some of the bands, I guess. Initially, I want to talk to you about like anime and manga and that sort of stuff, but like a couple months into our friendship, I realized that you're not Japanese. So I figured this can be better.
I'm just gonna leave the thing about being Japanese for later, but I do watch anime and read manga. No more racist jokes.
All right. So I figured we should start off with how the Korean entertainment industry came to be. So what we're gonna do is I did some research, and since you're Korean, you're gonna correct me if I'm wrong and give your opinion about it.
I'll do my best.
So this started out when I was doing it like a bit of research about Parasite, and so Parasite is like the strong contender movie, the Korean movie of 2019. But Burning was also a very strong international contender movie of 2018. So there is like a bit of a pattern that the Korean entertainment industry is actually really taking off, and I looked into like how that came to be. Because after the Korean Civil War, both sides of the border went through some poverty. And when you're going through poverty, the entertainment industry is not usually the first industry that. Throughout the 80s and the 90s, the government took a special interest and funded the entertainment industry. And that kind of made sense for them because they already had these sort of like technology companies going on so that they could supplement the industry with the hardware necessary, right? You guys had Samsung and other stuff like, and I actually heard a little story about it in the 90s in a government meeting of all the Korean ministers and stuff. The Minister for Culture and Entertainment sort of asks the other ministers how much revenue Hyundai made over the last year, and they tell the guy like, oh, it made this much revenue and that sort of stuff. And the Minister of Entertainment looks at him and says, oh, okay, that's pretty much about what the last Jurassic Park movie did in US last year. So that's how the government comes to realize that entertainment can be super lucrative, and they decide to invest in it.
I think Korean entertainment is definitely something very precious to Korea. There might be a lot of faults, which we'll talk about, like you said. But yeah, I can see that. Are there any like Turkish or non-Korean stereotypes that you want to like fact check on me?
No. What I really want to know is like, did it kind of take off after Gangnam Style and Psy?
I think the international K-pop business did kind of like kick off with Psy. It kind of like snowballed on with like BTS, things like that. Oh, and not just K-pop, but K-dramas are really also very well made, and they sell well overseas.
I am aware of that, yeah.
You did your research.
So when we look at like the history of boy bands and history of ensembles, we can kind of see this trend going on, like starting with the Beatles. NSYNC emerges to the scene in US. Beatles started off in UK. NSYNC starts off in US, and we can almost see that like every 10 or 20 years, the trend of boy bands come back, be lucrative for a while, and then kind of like fade into history to be forgotten.
Well, a thought on that is boy bands are boy bands. The members eventually grow up and they don't look as handsome anymore.
Yeah, that's one thing about the K-pop industry and how it is so lucrative, because when we look at entertainment industry, we can see that like there's a certain age group that sells a lot of merchandise compared to other age groups. For example, like I'm a fan of Game of Thrones and I'm a fan of Breaking Bad and that sort of TV shows that are targeted for the adult audience. But I'm
Mhm.
never gonna spend that much money on original merchandise of Breaking Bad. Not that there is a lot out there. But when it comes to the age group of between like 10 and 16, or more, to be more specific, 12 and 14, you can actually become really lucrative selling of merchandise. And that's kind of like the Disney audience worldwide.
Are you saying that because you are your age, your age group wouldn't be like a great audience to sell to compared to
Yep,
people 10 to 15?
yep, exactly.
Fakire 4 olsun. Fakire 4 milyar olsun. Ha?
Okay, I guess that kind of ties into how like you only see little kids begging their parents in the store to buy them candy.
Exactly.
It like wears off as you
And that's
age and you like become more money smart.
true. And that's kind of like why Disney is the most lucrative entertainment company in the history ever, because they cater to kids and they found so many industries that they can do this, whether it's the parks or it's the cruise lines or it's the merchandise. But K-pop emerges as something very different. And I think something more teenage targeted compared to what most of the Disney products come up to be, you know?
A question from me.
Okay.
What do Turkish people think of K-pop and Korean entertainment?
I mean, I didn't do like a whole lot of research in the army in Turkey, but I kind of have this instinct that there's a substantial army in Turkey.
Evet. Burada biz sabahtan beri onu bekliyoruz ve Justin bize bir hay bile diyemiyor.
An army of substantial size at least. This is just an instinct.
Bir hay bile diyemiyor.
Is is K-pop and K entertainment, I don't know, common or popular?
So I would say so, but if you look at the other countries and compare them to Turkey, I would say that K entertainment has that very small slice when compared to Hollywood, which is same with like the European countries or South American or African countries probably, because I would say that K-pop probably has a bigger slice in Asian and Southeast Asian countries more than that they do in the Western world, I would say. We used to talk about how these how there's like this conservative culture in Korea when it comes to like starting a family and getting married and having kids at an early age. Would you say that this public pressure on mostly girls having to find a partner and having to like start a family or stuff like that, do you think that resonates into like these young girls like being so huge fans of like these K-pop idols?
There are a lot of theories on how Korean beauty standards and K-pop interact. And I do have my own opinions, which some people might not agree with. But for sure, K-pop is, at least the people involved in K-pop are kind of bound by Korean conservative values sometimes.
We will kind of get to the toxicity part, or you know what, we can get to the toxicity part right now, because this is actually not a very natural process for K-pop bands or individual artists as well. There are academies that they go in, train, and these bands are formed sort of like sports teams with certain members having certain strengths such as dancing and rapping and or being able to sing vocally. And it's a very unnatural process if you look at it, because they don't write their own lyrics. Most of the time, they don't even play their own instruments. Their dances are choreographed. So when I watch a clip, I know for a fact that that's not coming out of that individual artist.
I do agree, but I also want to point out that toxic nature is not solely exclusive to Korea. I think you can see that in America all the time. Child actors who have to grow up in that spotlight. I think when you decide to go into the K-pop industry, just as you would decide to become a child actor in Hollywood, it's a life decision at a young age. And some people want out and some people are like perfectly happy there.
No, but in US, if you start out as a child actor and if you plan on becoming a successful adult actor, you actually have to be a good actor. And in the K-pop industry, it's not so natural. It's very unnatural. Like it's very like handmade, sort of feels like. It's very assembled. I mean, it's sort of like these football clubs in Europe that they have these huge youth programs, like for example Borussia Dortmund or Altınordu in Turkey. Say Altınordu.
Altınordu.
Again.
Oh no.
Go ahead. Say Altınordu. Go ahead. Give it a
Say
try.
it slowly.
Go on. I'm gonna type it for you.
Altınordu.
Again.
I already said it twice. No more.
Okay, your Turkish sucks.
I said it just like you did.
No.
I did. Wait. I don't think I'm done with like toxic. Like I said before, because K-pop is such a valuable asset to the Korean economy and like international image, I think, and also even within the country, you want to produce it. I think it's gotten to the point where you want to and can produce the most perfect K-pop. You know what I mean? You want everything. You want the good music and you want the good dancing and you want the good looks. It's gotten to the point where the K-pop industry has gotten really efficient at it. I don't know if I agree with it, but I do respect it for like how efficient it's gotten.
Mm-hmm. And I think that the toxicity is also like an effect of their target audience as well, because their target audience is actually 12 to 14-year-old kids, mostly girls when it comes to bands like BTS, or boys when it comes to bands like Blackpink, right? And these kids are actually like, they're in love with their favorite idol. Like they're in like a relationship, and them having another relationship that is publicized, or maybe them having like a political opinion, stuff like that, that kind of ruins it, and that affects their popularity and the amount of merchandise that they can sell.
Well, just as it would affect people in American boy bands, I feel.
Mm-hmm. But I mean,
like there was a lot of backlash. I remember how much backlash there was for Selena Gomez's and Justin Bieber's relationship, because they both target young audiences, and I don't know. It's not just a Korean thing.
Yeah, you're right. But then again, after the murder of George Floyd, you can see that child actors or musicians or stars that used to be under Disney contract or not, it's like Justin Bieber or Selena Gomez, coming out and speaking against police brutality. I feel like that wouldn't have been the case for K-pop stars, you know, to have like that strong of a political opinion. But at the end of the day, Justin Bieber can still come out and say, well, if you don't think police brutality is not real, then you should be like listening to someone else maybe. Actually,
I think at least a few K-pop stars have like spoken out against it. It just, I just feel like the histories of Korea and social makeup of Korea and America is a little different, and we haven't struggled with racism. There is racism in Korea, but we haven't struggled with it in the same way America has for the past hundreds of years.
Even if they come out and have an opinion about it, I feel like with the K-pop industry, it might be more of a move made by the agency or by their management.
For the K-pop singers who have spoken out that I have heard of, they can speak English. They're from the U.S. or like they've stayed in the U.S. or an English-speaking place for a while, like Amber Liu or Eric Nam. So I think the K-pop, I think that it doesn't have to be just an agency thing. It can also be like a personal thing, because K-pop is like American inspired, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So there has to be some kind of the J Park company, I think. I don't know what the official name for it is, but they've also spoken out about it too.
We can go back to the merchandising for a minute, because I feel like we talked about the merchandising strategy of Disney, but I actually think that the K-pop industry and the Korean entertainment industry in general took it to a whole nother level. Because when you say merchandising, they're like two ends of the spectrum. BTS coffee mugs worth $10 and you can sell 100,000 of them, which is basically what Disney does most of the time. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you have designer-made, very specific high-end retail products, which can go up for very, very high values. This is the case for most of the K-pop industry, because they can sell millions of physical copies of albums that come with the posters or maybe like a t-shirt or that type of like small stuff. But then on the other hand, you have these designer brands that are actually designed by some of the members of these bands. And when they're like designer made by these pop idols, the prices can go up. So it's almost like having a Disney store and having a Supreme store in the same industry altogether, which is very, very lucrative, because you can reach to very low income audiences and very high income audiences as well. So I think that's one step that the K-pop industry has it over the rest of the teenage targeted audience in the US. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how these ensemble bands are created and how they create these bands so that it can like mimic some of the social structures that we have in our society. Like every band has this like alpha male and the beta male and this like sort of like this outcast type of guy. And yeah, go ahead.
There might be more popular members in certain groups, but it's more of what categories or personality stereotypes they fit into. There's usually a leader type, and then everyone else is along like the same ground. Like you'll have the cute type, the cool type, the aggressive type. I don't know. They just have tropes.
Okay, I feel like when it comes to BTS, that one the main guy is my favorite guy. I forgot his name. RM maybe his name is. I feel like he's my favorite guy because I feel like he's the only one that can actually rap, and the rest might be just ad-libbing maybe.
I don't know. For me, how it's always worked with the tropes is like the leader has to be like really hot, and that would like catch my eye, and then I would like notice the rest of the members and be like, wow.
The leader of Blackpink is kind of hot. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I think Lisa is really hot. She's not Korean. Did you know that?
I know. I realized most of these members are actually like Canadian Korean or American Korean. Like they sort of have that immigrant background, and I feel like that kind of helps them to target an international audience more, because most of them can speak a substantial amount of English, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know Lisa has been really good at expanding the K-pop influence into Southeast Asia, because I think she's from Thailand. She's also, the reason why I like her so much is because she's also really active in human rights, especially in like where she came from.
So what do you see for the future of the K-pop in the aftermath of the coronavirus pandemic and the ongoing political unrest in the world, do you think that K-pop is going to take off, or it's going to like slow down? We talked about how the boy band trend is something that comes and goes throughout the decades. Do you think that it's going to slow down because of that? What do you think?
Boy bands themselves will come and go, but they'll always be replaced by some new boy band. BTS could very well be replaced by an Australian boy band or something like that. You just never know.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the K-pop industry will keep going. It's produced a lot of like great things. Not just BTS, but like songs in particular that I like really love. That they were part of my childhood and things like that. And I think as long as if they keep themselves rooted at the heart of Korean people like that, K-pop will continue to live on. I think that back when K-pop was first coming around, there were a lot of like human rights violations going on. Got the worst of it were the idols themselves, and they would often commit suicide. And also the world is becoming a more modern and hopefully inclusive place.
Last part, if I have to be honest, I don't know much about the Turkish pop industry, and there are other people out there making much high quality content about Turkish pop and the history of the Turkish culture and so on. But if you have any questions about the Turkish pop industry or the Turkish music industry, I'm happy to answer.
I remember one thing you told me about how Turkish pop is not targeted towards younger people.
Yeah.
Why is that?
So there are a couple of bands in the Turkish history that are targeted towards the younger audience, and even some of those Turkish bands like Hepsi Bir, they end up having an actual sitcom, which was pretty unusual when it was done back in the day. But apart from that, the Turkish music industry mostly stemmed from the nightlife in Istanbul over the last decades, mainly in the 80s and the 90s. Most of the Turkish stars were stage performers, the older versions of Turkish nightclubs, which were back in the day called gazinos. Only if they were good enough to perform on the stage, they could actually get like a record deal and then maybe become famous. So that is also one of the reasons that the Turkish pop, even though there are exceptions like Aleyna Tilki, the Turkish pop industry mostly is targeted towards the adult audience, because that's how most of them started out, in nightclubs.
Do you ever have boy bands with the members who are like selectively picked for their looks and not singing ability?
No, I don't think so. Like in the case of One Direction, the members of One Direction applied to I think British Got Talent separately, and they were put together in a group by Simon, right? We have that type of TV show culture in Turkey. We have The Voice, we have the Turkish Got Talent, we have all that other stuff, and mostly operated by the same guy, but never ever that they actually try to create a band formed with members that didn't actually know each other in the first place.
I don't know. Like, I feel like there's a general feeling in Korea that you can't be an idol unless if you start young. Like, my cousin tried out a few years ago, but they turned her down because she was too old.
How old was she?
18.
That's not old.
Do you think there'll ever be a point in Turkish entertainment where you can't be popular unless if you start young?
No, I don't think so. In fact, I would say no, and I would say a hard no, because the Turkish music and in general the Turkish culture is very much centered around agitation or the Oriental sadness to a certain degree. Like, we love getting sad. Like, we love being sad. We love sad songs. We love sad movies. We love We just love.
Isn't that just a global thing? You like people just love tearjerkers across the world.
No. Everything that we do makes us sad. Our music, our movies, our food is hot as hell. Like that's how we like it, because this Turkey is a rough environment and it's a rough geography. So we have that kind of music culture centered around agitation and centered around like pain. So it is not unnatural for artists to emerge in their 30s, 40s, maybe even 50s. And on the contrary, most of the time it's hard for very young artists to make a case for themselves, because I would say that it's not very easy for young kids or teenagers to understand that sort of like emotional depth or that sort of pain, you know, the longing for love or those type of themes. Like some of the biggest stars in Turkey who do traditional Turkish music, they can be almost to a degree like sex idols and still be in their 40s and the 50s.
Like J-Lo. Oh, you know that one Turkish pop music video I was watching when you the first one I sent you a few pictures? I was kind of like surprised to see such an old and bald guy like being the love interest in that music video. I feel like that would never happen in Korea.
Well, that will happen in Turkey. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, Turkish people from time to time, they joke about the fact that like a proper guy must be fat and ugly.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my. Well, that's nice, isn't it?
Not for me. But I think that K-pop is very well known throughout the world, and there are a lot of resources that people can educate themselves on. I just wanted to ask some certain specific questions and get your opinion on it as a Korean native. And so these are kind of like the questions that I wanted to answer for the Turkish people who might be wondering like more in-depth details about the industry or how it. I feel like we talked a substantial amount of shit about the K-pop industry, so there might be a couple army members after us.
What shit did we say about?
We talked about how unnatural it is, how they don't write their own lyrics.
You're the one who said it was unnatural. I never said anything about that. And I said that I respect the K-pop industry for being efficient. There's no insulting happening here.
Wow. You're just gonna let those 12-year-old girls murder me, huh?
What do you think about the Turkish youth being impacted by beauty standards? I feel like they're pretty tough in Korea.
Oh, they're pretty tough in Turkey too. I mean, my parents are doctors, and their plastic surgeon friends make 10 times more than they do. I mean, every now and then I hear my dad bitching about why he chose orthopedics over plastic surgery when he was choosing his specialty, because they make a lot of money.
Tamer Bey, takipçilerime merhaba der misiniz?
Merhabalar.
Other than that, the makeup industry in Turkey is huge. The beauty standards huge. Everything's just like, I mean, there are certain parts of Istanbul that you will go and you will see the same girl 100 times, the same hair color. Maybe they'll be wearing like colored contacts, eyelashes, brows, stuff like that. Yeah, it is very impacted. And in general, I feel like the beauty standards are impacted in countries where there is like a social expectancy of like finding a partner, having more of a communal affair with the society rather than being an individual on your own. Like, if you're a girl in Korea or in Turkey, and if your parents and your friends and if the society expects you to get married sooner or later and start a family and have kids, that will have an impact on how you how you look at yourself, and that will eventually, on a mass scale, have a positive impact on the makeup and plastic industry.
And I totally agree with what you just said about going to certain parts of Turkey and seeing like the same girl 100 times. It's definitely like that. One thing that I always joked about with my friends about high school was not being able to remember the names of our underclassmen because they just looked the same.
Merhaba arkadaşlar. Videomu izlediğiniz için çok teşekkür ederim. Bu benim YouTube'daki ilk tecrübemdi. O yüzden videonun sonunu çekmeyi unuttuk. Fakat Jenny'nin hepinize selamları var ve sevgilerini yolluyor. Videonun katıldığınız ve katılmadığınız bölümlerine alta yorum olarak yazmayı unutmayın. Bu kadar. Görüşmek üzere.